Have you ever felt like you've had one of those weeks or months or heck, years where nothing seems to go right and you just feel off? We're going to talk a little bit about that today, what that means for your blended family life, and how you can reset yourself. I'm Cameron. I spent years building my career and creating a life I loved. And when my Prince Charming finally showed up, he had 4 kids in tow. Fast forward through lots of mistakes made and lessons learned, step family life was much more complicated than I realized. If you're looking for help with blended family life, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries, where we keep it real as we dish about all the things. This is your weekly dose of blended family inspiration and encouragement. You're not the wicked stepmother, so let me help you find your fairy tale ending. Come on, let's do this. Hey there. So, today I want to talk a little bit about the feeling you get when you know something's off. And I think probably a lot of us have had this feeling a lot in the last year. I mean, let's face it, 2020 was basically a dumpster fire, and 2021 is hopefully going to be better, but it has started off a little rocky, I think, for most everybody as we are navigating all of the things around the pandemic and vaccinations and getting kids back to school and homeschooling and, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, let's face it, things have just been a little nuts, right? I think everybody has felt a little weird this last year and a half or so. But, as stepmoms, honestly, that's a feeling that we can kind of identify with already. I mean, a lot of our life feels like something's off because so much of stepmom life is unpredictable. So much of stepmom life is out of control and out of your control. You know what I mean? So it's real easy to kind of get into stepmom life and then feel like something's off, something's not the way it should be. So, how do you know when you're kind of off track or when you're having that feeling? I mean, I think part of it is you just know. I mean, you come into a blended family and you've had probably some independence, you've had your own life, and now you're sort of plopped into this family unit and figuring out, how to form this new family unit and, how things are going to be. And let's be real, no two stepmom journeys are the same, right? Every family has a different vibe. Every family has different challenges. Every family has its different, special, amazing qualities. But how often have you looked around and thought to yourself, what in the world am I doing here? I do not belong in this world. I can't do this like I'm doing it now for another second. I mean, have you ever woken up and felt like there's like a weight bearing down on you, one that you just cannot unload, or like you're a stranger in your own family? That's what I mean when I say things are feeling off or like you're off track. And let me tell you, you are not alone if you're feeling any of those feelings, okay? You are not alone. Let's be real. Look around at all the other stepmoms you know, even when their life looks perfect. Look at what you're seeing on social media. You're seeing, these amazing things they're doing with their stepkids and their awesome marriage and a great relationship with their partner's ex. Surely they have never had these moments like you're feeling right now. Yeah, I'm going to stop you right there because they have. They absolutely have. But what they're putting on social media is just very different and not reflective of any of those challenges. Okay. So let's start with the baseline of what you see on social media is not what's actually happening behind closed doors. Okay. So let's talk about what happens behind those closed doors. Behind those closed doors, when you wake up and you feel like there's a weight bearing down on you, when you're feeling off, what do? Well, if you're from the South like me, you just bury all those emotions. You put them in a jar and you screw the lid on real tight and you just forget they're there. No, that is totally wrong. I am absolutely kidding. That is not the way to approach it. But in all seriousness, that's how a lot of us were brought up, right? Things happen. You forget about them. You brush them under the rug, and you never really address the real emotions underneath it. And that's why we see so much of these happy lives on social media, is because, it is much easier to present a happy life and a perfect life than it is to actually address what's happening underneath the surface. So, what I'm going to ask you to do as a stepmom is actually address what's happening underneath what you're presenting to the world, okay? If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like you don't fit in to your family, if you're feeling like it's all just too much, if you're feeling off track, I want you to confront it. I want you to do the hard work. I want you to go deeper. You cannot make a difference for yourself unless you get to the bottom of what's going on. So, how do you do that? Well, we're going to talk about that. Hey, stepmom, do you want a totally free 30-minute coaching session with yours truly? Well, you're in luck because I am giving one away. If you would like to win a totally free 30-minute coaching session with me, just head over to iTunes Podcasts, leave a review for the Stepmom Diaries, preferably by saying something lovely, of course. Screenshot your review and send it to me at hello@thiscustomlife.com, or you can post it and tag me on social media. I'll enter you into a drawing, and one lucky winner stepmom is going to get a totally free 30-minute coaching session with me. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to iTunes and leave your review now. All right, so we have talked about going deeper, figuring out what's going on. So the first thing I want you to do is very simple. It's take a breath. I want you to sit down with a pen and paper, and I want you to think about what it is that's making you feel like this. What is it that's making you feel so overwhelmed? We've all been there, and 9 times out of 10, that feeling is coming from me putting so much pressure on myself, feeling like I have to be everything to everybody and I must be dropping the ball on something or somebody. Does that sound familiar at all? My tough love for you today is, after you take a breath, after you think about what it is that's making you feel so overwhelmed, is if it's because you feel a little guilty, like you're not doing all the things, or like you're disappointing people in your life, stop feeling guilty. You are not going to be all the things to all the people in your life. You're just not. Whether you're a stepmom or a biological mom or not a mom at all, you are never going to be all the things to all the people in your life. It is totally natural as stepmoms for us to feel like we have to fit into all these different roles that are shoved at us, whether it's by the media or our families. We're asked to do a lot by fitting into this new family. We're asked to take on the role of spouse. We're asked to immediately take on a parental type of role. And we're asked to love these kids that aren't ours. We're asked to, develop a relationship with them and help, make sure the household is running correctly. There are lots of things that we are asked to do that are above and beyond. I hate to use the word traditional marriage or partnership, but I can't think of another one that's better. But, we're asked to do a lot more and be a lot more than what women were traditionally asked to do as wives and mothers. So my tough love for you is to stop feeling guilty about it and to stop putting so much pressure on yourself. I know that we want things to be perfect when we enter this blended family life. And I have told you before, I got into this thinking that it was going to be instant family and that we were going to have this, awesome, Norman Rockwell painting family holiday life. That's just not the reality. That's not anybody's reality. So you need to not put the pressure on yourself to make that reality fit. We all want to be a good stepmom, and it's easy to even feel like you want to put the pressure on yourself to be a better parent than their biological mom. Especially if there are a lot of deficits there. If you look at the biological mom and say, well, gosh, she doesn't do this and she doesn't do that. So here's my chance. I can be super mom. No, just no. You are not their biological mom. You never will be. However, you have an opportunity to develop a really unique and special relationship with the kids in your role as stepmom without trying to take on the super mom role. And let me tell you, that pressure to be the best, whether we're putting it on ourselves or whether, we're feeling it from our partners or our families, that pressure to be everything and to do everything, that is not natural. It's not natural. It's just not. So stop putting that pressure on yourself. Stop feeling guilty. The other thing that's not natural are the stereotypes and misconceptions that are shoved on us, right? For example, back to the Norman Rockwell, pressure that I put on myself. We're not going to slide seamlessly into this family that we have not been a part of prior to now. There are going to be bumps and bruises. There are going to be kids who resist our amazing charm and kids who may still be mourning the loss of their first family, right? I don't know if you caught my last episode, number 15, about outsider syndrome. It's real, and it happens to pretty much every stepmom. If you didn't catch it, head on over to thiscustomlife.com/episode 15, and I'll put the link in the show notes too. But outsider syndrome is real, and it happens because it is not smooth to slide into a family that was a pre-existing family unit before you came along. It's not natural. It can be happy and it can be really fulfilling for everybody, and you can develop a wonderful relationship with your stepkids. But it is not going to happen immediately. Things are not going to be perfectly smooth, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. So don't put that kind of pressure on yourself, and don't feel guilty when there are bumps along the way, because there absolutely will be. I'll tell you, I had a student during my last session of the Blended Family Formula course that I teach who was telling me about one of the discussions she had with her partner that I had assigned as homework. And she had some great conversations with her partner. He was generally very, very supportive of her, not a jerk at all. And they were talking about their roles. And he said to her, she was talking about her expectations when she became a stepmom. And, he was talking about what his expectations of her as a stepmom had been. And he said, well, I don't know. I kind of thought you would just take my ex-wife's place as a mom, but do it better because she wasn't good. Now, I want to be clear again. Her partner's totally not a jerk. He's really supportive of her. But this goes back to sort of these expectations that things are going to be seamless and that you're just going to slide into this family unit and, everything's going to be fine. And that is not only not the case, but it ends up creating a lot of pressure on stepmoms, right? The student that I mentioned told me that they ended up having a really great discussion because they were both able to kind of talk about what their misconceptions were going into blended family life and talk about what her role should be. And that's a really important conversation. It's one that, I would love for every blended family to have before they get into blended family life, right? It rarely happens. I certainly didn't have that conversation with Craig when we were getting married. We had it after the fact, which, ended up kind of helping us reset and improve our blended family life. But it's a really important conversation. And it was a huge breakthrough for this student. It lifted an enormous burden off her shoulders when she realized that, her partner had had these kind of misconceptions and they were able to clear that up and move forward. So I don't want you to feel guilty about feeling overwhelmed. And frankly, I don't want you to feel guilty about anything you're feeling. You need to embrace your emotions. Name what it is that you're feeling and embrace it. And then if it's not a healthy emotion, you can deal with it, right? Okay, so here's the other thing I wanted to tell you. If you're feeling that nameless dread and that feeling of overwhelm, if you can't quite figure out what's causing it, if it's not that you're feeling guilty about trying to do all the things, if guilt is not the driver, then I want you to take a step back so that you can process and so that you can think. So, what does that look like, taking a step back? Whatever works best for you, really. I mean, it can look like anything. For me, when I take a step back, it's getting some time alone. It's getting some time alone with my laptop to write. It's, taking a bath or getting a massage, something that relaxes me, right? But that could look different for you. Maybe you like to meditate, which I think is a great practice for stepmoms. Maybe journaling helps you. And I generally feel like journaling can help everyone. If you can start writing, even if you don't really know what you want to say, somehow what's going on in your head will end up on that piece of paper in that journal. And it'll help you process and help you deal with whatever it is that you're struggling with. So I definitely encourage that. But whatever it is that relaxes you, take a step back and do that. Now, whatever you are going to do to take a step back, I would ask, make sure it's not something that gets your mind going on something else, right? So if reading relaxes you, maybe don't sit and read because you're going to be thinking about what you're reading. Or if binge watching The Housewives relaxes you, which I am not going to lie, that is one of the things that I like to do to relax. But maybe don't do that in this circumstance because you're going to be thinking about, the latest table flip or fight or whatever. Find something else. I want you to really have your mind clear so that you can process your emotions, so you can really figure out what's going on. And I think when you're able to get a minute away from like the daily crazy and hustle and bustle, you'll surprise yourself and you'll be able to kind of think through what's going on. So, like I said, I do want you to try journaling. Write down what you're thinking. And I don't mean some, pink journal with flowers and a little lock, like you had when you were little, or at least I did. I mean, just have a piece of paper, scratch out some notes as things come to you or as words come to you. Again, I think the act of sitting quietly will let your mind wander and let you start tackling what it is that you may have been avoiding thinking about. And this may not be a pleasant exercise for you. Let's be clear. You may discover that your overwhelm, this sort of nameless sense of dread or whatever it is, this feeling off, it might be happening for some pretty unhappy reason. I don't know. I don't know what that is. I'm just saying going through these emotions may not be super pleasant, but coming out on the other side of identifying it, then you can deal with it. And, even if it's something really ugly, I mean, what if you realize that this sort of nameless dread happens every time your stepkid comes over and the truth is you don't really like them? That's a fairly unpleasant truth, right? It's a fairly unpleasant thing to think about. And that's a pretty scary thing to think about having to talk to your partner about. Like, hey, I love you, but I don't really like your kid. That's really hard. But you know what? If that's how you feel, once you have named it, you can deal with it. You can figure out an action plan to address it. You can absolutely deal with it if you don't like your stepkid. That's a conversation you can have with your partner. You can figure out some boundaries. You can think about what it is that you don't like. Maybe there are ways that you can live with them and, it doesn't have to blow up your family or anything like that. You can deal with it. It is an unpleasant thing to deal with. But once you name it, you can deal with it. The absolute worst thing you can do if you're feeling this overwhelm and, this feeling of being off and like you can't put your finger on it, the worst thing you can do is to do what we do down south and, shove it in that jar and screw the lid on real tight and try to forget about it. I want you to deal with it. Deal with the ugly so that you can get to the good stuff. And once you're able to, you're going to feel so much lighter and you're going to feel so much more able to tackle anything that comes your way. It's going to be a game changer for you. So I hope this has given you some food for thought. Sometimes dealing with stepmom realities isn't super pleasant, but when you get through it, then you can get to a stepmom life that you really love. So thanks for joining me today. And again, all the information will be in the show notes. at thiscustomlife.com/episode 16. That's it for this week. If you've enjoyed our chat, I hope you'll help spread the word. Share this episode with friends and head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review. And don't forget, for more great stepmom content, head on over to thiscustomlife.com and follow me on social media. Just search This Custom Life on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Until next time, you keep being you and know that we are in this together. See you here next week.